The first thing I did after being reborn was to grab some poison and rush to the bun shop in the west of the city. The young man selling buns was the real crown prince who had been exiled to the common people. Soon after, he would return to the imperial palace with his childhood sweetheart. First, he would kill the fake crown prince, then torture the crown princess. First, he would kill the fake crown prince, then torture the crown princess. On the day the crown princess died, heavy snow fell and turned the ground red. I was that unlucky crown princess. Unexpectedly, I ran into the fake crown prince rushing over with a sword at the door of the bun shop. I raised my eyebrows and said, "What's up? Want to join me? Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to." Chapter 1. It was the day of the crown prince's wedding, and the East Palace was heavily guarded. Xiao Jinglan and I were about to raise our cups of wine. Suddenly, we heard rapid footsteps outside. The commander of the Imperial Guards kicked open the door, holding a bright yellow scroll. After he finished reading the Imperial Edict, he waved to the Imperial Guards behind him to arrest Xiao Jinglan. The fan in my hand clattered to the ground. I looked up to meet Xiao Jinglan's equally stunned eyes. Xiao Jinglan was not the real crown prince. On this very day, the true crown prince had been found. I rushed to the palace in the middle of the night to see the emperor. The emperor, seated on the high throne, looked tired and sighed as he looked at me. His gaze deep. "Yuan Shi, rest assured. No matter who the crown prince is, you will always be the crown princess." I shook my head anxiously. "Your servant does not seek the position of crown princess." But no need to say more. The emperor's expression darkened, cutting me off. "Escort the crown princess out of the palace." As I stumbled out of the palace gate, a ghostly figure by the corridor called out to me, "Are you Jiang Yuanshi? Your lonely crown princess?" He looked 7 or 8 parts like the emperor, except that the corners of his eyes were slightly upturned, giving him a more mercenary look. He looked me up and down and said, "Nothing special." I was worried about Xiao Jinglan's safety and didn't take his words to heart. I bowed and hurriedly left. To my surprise, a few days later, the crown prince came looking for me. He had a mysterious smile on his lips as he led me into the imperial prison. Xiao Jinglan was tied to the gallows, his face deathly pale. Chains thicker than a wrist were threaded through his collarbone, and drops of blood fell from the execution frame, staining the ground a deep red. Looking at Xiao Jinglan, who was no longer human, my heart ached, and I collapsed to the ground. "Does the crown prince's consort like the gift I prepared for you? If it weren't for my mother empress quarreling with the emperor and swapping me with an abandoned infant from the commoners, this lowly peasant should have enjoyed 20 years of wealth and honor that rightfully belonged to me." The crown prince grabbed me by the back of the neck and dragged me to Xiao Jinglan. He personally took a red-hot branding iron and pressed it forcefully into Xiao Jinglan's wound. Sizzle! The air filled with the smell of burning flesh. "No. Please. Don't." I struggled to break free and rushed to Xiao Jinglan's side to protect him. But the crown prince dragged me out of the cell by my hair, his cold voice whispering in my ear, "I am the crown prince. If I want him dead, he must die." The eunuch led a woman dressed in a duck-egg-colored dress to wait outside. I knew that she was the crown prince's childhood sweetheart. When the crown prince was living among the common people, it was her family who took care of him. The emperor disliked her low birth and had been reluctant to agree to her marriage to the crown prince. The woman threw herself into the crown prince's arms and called him Rui. His Majesty had already given the crown prince the name Shaolin. Throughout the palace, only she still called him by his old name. The crown prince lowered his head and kissed her forehead, his cold gaze falling on me. He looked like a venomous snake ready to strike at any moment. A few days later, Xiao Jinglan was executed by dismemberment. Upon hearing the news, I felt a wave of dizziness and collapsed from my chair. Xiao Jinglan, The darkness mixed with the smell of blood was like a crazy vine, trapping me and making it hard to breathe. Miss. Wake up. A pair of cold hands touched my face. I grabbed those hands and sat up abruptly, looking at the familiar surroundings in the room. The maid Yin Chang murmured softly, "Miss, did you have another nightmare? 5 days ago, I was reborn. I was reborn 1 month before my marriage to Xiao Jinglan. At that time, the real crown prince had not yet been found. It took me some time to confirm that I had truly been reborn. My past life was like a nightmare, returning every night. I remember that on the day I died, it was snowing heavily in the capital. It was very cold, but I couldn't feel it anymore. I stabbed my throat with the hairpin Xiao Jinglan had given me. I collapsed under the plum tree in the East Palace. That white plum tree may have shed its blood-red petals for the first time. Seeing me in a daze, Yunxiang called me again. I finally came to my senses. I pulled out several silver notes from the dressing table and handed them to her. Go buy some poison for me. The strongest kind. Something that can kill with a single drop. Do this secretly and make sure no one finds out. Yunxiang nodded and left with the silver notes. She never asked questions, she simply obeyed my every word. It was like this in my previous life. And it is the same in this one. But that was Yunxiang. Because she tried so hard to protect me. Zhao Yanshu cut out her tongue and threw her into a brothel to be given to those filthy beggars. I knelt in front of Shaolin and begged him for a long time before he gave Yunxiang back to me. But all he gave me was a handful of white bones. It wasn't until I was about to die that Zhao Yanshu told me. The soup I drank every day was made from Yunxiang's flesh. Thinking of this, I leaned on the corner of the table and vomited profusely. Shaolin, Zhao Yanshu, and the person who pushed me into the abyss and took my place. Now that I have been reborn, I will not let the events of my previous life happen again. Yun Chang returned quickly. The moment she pushed open the door, sunlight shone into the room. I subconsciously raised my arm to shield my eyes. Perhaps because I had been blind for so long in my previous life. I was not yet accustomed to the brightness of this life. Yunxiang placed the poison she had bought in front of me. Miss. The boss said that this poison is very potent. Just 1 coin is enough to kill a person. And even the great Luo immortal would be powerless. I stared at the large bag of poison and fell into deep thought. Yunxiang was still so thoughtful. My father returned from the Imperial Academy. He mentioned that the Crown Prince had been absent for 3 consecutive days due to illness. I was holding a teacup to warm my hands when I paused. Did he say what kind of illness it was? It seems he caught a cold. In my previous life, Xiao Jinglan hadn't fallen ill at this time. Could it be that because I was reborn, the course of this life was different from the previous one? I hurriedly put down my teacup and gave Yunxiang a wink. Yunxiang immediately understood, Miss. The books drying in the courtyard haven't been collected yet. I slapped my forehead, look at my memory. My father wanted to say a few more words to me. But when he turned around, I was already gone. I went back to my room, found the bag of poison Yunxiang had bought, and carefully put it in my sleeve. Long nights bring many dreams, and unforeseen changes are bound to arise. I must ensure that Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu disappear from this world completely. Starting today, changing into casual clothes, I left the mansion through the back gate. Taking a detour, I arrived at the dumpling shop in the eastern part of the city. From afar, I saw the once reckless Crown Prince Shaolin, now busily kneading dough. One batch after another of buns came out of the steamer, filling the air with steam. A loud noise rang in my ears, and my hands and feet grew cold. I unconsciously took a few steps back. Before my eyes, I saw him pressing me down and forcing me to watch the execution. No matter how much I cried and screamed, it was all in vain. Blood flowed everywhere through the cracks in the stone slabs, stinging my eyes. Later, Shaolin was forced to marry me because the emperor said, "The crown prince's wife can only be Jiang Yuanshi." On the day of the wedding, my mournful cries echoed throughout the entire East Palace. I begged him, but he wouldn't let me go. So naturally, I wouldn't let him go either. At that time, Shaolin was unaware that he was actually the crown prince. He was Shen Rue, a dumpling seller. Alongside Zhao Yanshu, he was introducing the types of dumplings to an old woman who frequently bought them. After purchasing the dumplings, the old woman remarked that the two of them were a perfect match, destined to be together. Zhao Yanshu blushed and turned away, her eyes and brows betraying her joy. Yes, they were a perfect match. And me? I was the stubborn rock standing between them. In my previous life, Zhao Yanshu resented me for taking the position of crown princess and deliberately ran away from the city. When Shaolin found her and brought her back, she said that she had hurt her eyes and they were painful. And she acted coquettishly, wanting me to suffer the same pain. Shaolin gouged out my eyes to make her happy. Afterward, he told the emperor it was my own fault. How could I have been so careless as to lose my eyes? After I went blind, Zhao Yanshua found new ways to torment me, pouring burning charcoal onto my hands and forcing me to catch it. If I failed to catch even one piece, he would kill one of my clan members. I shook my head vigorously, trying to erase these memories of my past life from my mind. Taking advantage of Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu's inattention, I lifted my skirt and quietly made my way to the back door of the dumpling shop. As long as I poisoned their food, I could live out this life in peace. To my surprise, I stumbled upon a familiar figure. I looked at the person who should have been convalescing in the Eastern Palace, then at the sword he held in his hand. I raised an eyebrow. What's the matter? Want to join me? He immediately understood my meaning, and the hand holding the sword trembled imperceptibly. You've also been reborn? I nodded, grabbed his sleeve, and pulled him inside. In this life, we must strike first and kill those two. I brought a large bag of poison. It will definitely kill them. Xiao Jinglan chuckled. I didn't know that Man was so ruthless. Hearing him call me by my nickname again, it felt like a lifetime ago. I turned back and glared at him. Put your sword away and talk later. Xiao Jinglan sheathed his sword and watched as I poisoned every dish. Finally, he took the remaining poison from my hands and used every last drop. To ensure nothing went wrong, Xiao Jinglan and I hurried away. On the way back, I counted the time on my fingers. They should be dead by now. Right? Xiao Jinglan suddenly stopped in his tracks. Should we go back and take a look? So the two of us sneaked back to the dumpling shop. The entrance was surrounded by a crowd of people. The officials were there too, carrying out two bodies covered in white cloth. They were fine just now. How could they be gone so suddenly? Such young lives. What a pity. It's not a pity at all. Xiao Jinglan and I exchanged glances, and the corners of our mouths couldn't help but curl upward. Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu were dead. Even my father could tell that I was in a good mood. He said that Xiao Jinglan had requested permission from the emperor, and we would be married in 5 days. Actually, the Ministry of Rites had already sent everything last month. A day earlier or later makes no difference. I went to the Eastern Palace to find Xiao Jinglan. Xiao Jinglan had just returned from the archery range, dressed in his riding gear, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and a headband tied around his forehead. He casually removed his wrist guards and tossed them to his attendant, then raised his eyes to look at me. His previously icy expression melted instantly. How long have you been waiting? Man? Not long. I just arrived. I followed him into the house. Why did the crown prince change the wedding date? The attendants were dismissed, and he reached out his arm, pulling me into his embrace. Xiao Jinglan held me close, leaning down to whisper in my ear, Man, I don't want to wait anymore. 5 days later, the Eastern Palace was adorned with lanterns and decorations, filled with festive cheer. Xiao Jinglan, dressed in a bright red wedding robe, looked even more handsome. The dragon and phoenix candles burned quietly before the bed. Xiao Jinglan held me close and we sank into the mandarin duck-patterned quilt. A wave of heat washed over my face, and I heard a muffled laugh as his kisses fell softly on my skin. The canopy hung low, and the candle wicks crackled. Long fingers patiently untied my sash. Suddenly, there was a rapid knock on the door. "Your Highness, His Majesty requests that you and the Crown Princess come to the palace." A bad feeling rose in my heart. In the imperial study, Xiao Lin, who should have been a corpse, stood beside the emperor. His gaze was cold and menacing as he looked at me and Xiao Jinglan. Xiao Lin wasn't dead. What had gone wrong? I furrowed my brows. My eyes filled with confusion as I looked at Xiao Jinglan. He squeezed my hand gently and whispered, "Let's wait and see." The night was long and dark outside the palace. Inside, the lamps burned brightly. A breeze blew from somewhere, brushing against the candlesticks on the imperial desk. The candlelight flickered, casting ghostly shadows on the emperor's profile. I saw from afar that the emperor was holding a jade token in his hand, his fingertips constantly rubbing the patterns on it. I knew the design of that jade token very well. In my previous life, Xiao Lin was discovered by the emperor's confidant because he accidentally revealed this jade pendant. The emperor sent people to investigate, and only then did he learn that the crown prince he had raised for many years was not his biological son. The real crown prince was cowering in that small bun shop, living in fear. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty. So the emperor was very indulgent towards Xiao Lin. He indulged him to the point of allowing him to torture and kill meritorious officials as he pleased. My father, brother, and family were all killed by him. Brother Jinglan, did you see the jade plaque in His Majesty's hand? In a moment, you should bite it and say that it's yours and that you lost it not long ago. I have a way to make His Majesty believe you, to avoid being overheard by those around us. I deliberately lowered my voice. In the past, whenever I needed something from Xiao Jinglan, I would always call him Jinglan brother. Xiao Jinglan spoke in a voice only the two of us could hear. "All right. Do as you say." Seeing Xiao Jinglan and me approaching, the emperor raised his eyes and glanced at us. It was only a fleeting glance, but it made me truly feel the emperor's authority. Perhaps it was because Xiao Jinglan and I had been reborn and completely disrupted the course of this life. Perhaps it was because the emperor did not yet know the truth that was buried beneath the palace walls. He did not immediately arrest Xiao Jinglan as he had done in my previous life. The hall was completely silent. The hall was extremely quiet. The emperor put away the jade token in his hand and waved for Xiao Lin to come forward. By the candlelight, I finally got a clear look at his face. There was a terrifying scar on his brow. He looked even more like an evil ghost crawling out of hell than Xiao Lin in my previous life. I must not let him succeed in becoming the crown prince. The emperor tapped the table lightly and said in a deep voice, "The secret guards brought this man back from the mass grave. Not only does he have the late empress's belongings on him, but he also looks so much like me. Prince, don't you find that strange?" Xiao Jinglan and I exchanged glances and understood. Something must have gone wrong with the poison that day, allowing him to escape. Zhao Yanshu must not be dead either. Before Xiao Jinglan could speak, the emperor continued. "I clearly remember giving the empress this jade token years ago. Why has the crown prince never worn it?" He continued to scrutinize Xiao Jinglan with a piercing gaze. It seemed he couldn't determine whether Xiao Jinglan or Xiao Lin was the true crown prince. Xiao Jinglan remained calm. "This jade token was my mother's keepsake. I have always treasured it and never dared to wear it. Recently, when I presented the betrothal gifts to the crown princess, I took it out to look at it, but unfortunately lost it. I have no idea where this person obtained my mother's jade token." Xiao Lin heard this and grew frantic. He shouted in defense, You're lying. The peasant family who adopted me said this jade plaque was placed in my swaddling clothes. It was left to me by my mother. The emperor's expression darkened abruptly, and he coldly said, I never knew that an object could have two owners. Since this jade token has been with this person since childhood and was lost by the crown prince, does the crown prince have any evidence to prove that this jade token was lost by you? I heard a different meaning in the emperor's words. At this moment, he seemed to believe more that Shaolin was his real son. After all, he looked 70% like him. I took a step forward and bowed gracefully to the emperor. Your Majesty, His Highness the Crown Prince gave this jade token to me, and I lost it by accident. His Highness was only protecting me. The prince demonstrated to me that this jade token has a clever mechanism. Your Majesty, why not give it to me to test it out? With everyone watching, I couldn't possibly fake it. Could I? I carry this jade token with me every day. How could I not know about its mechanism? Shaolin sneered. The emperor frowned, studied him for a moment, then looked at me and tossed the jade token to a eunuch attendant. Yuan Shi. No matter who becomes the crown prince, you are the crown princess I have chosen. I knelt down with a thud. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your kindness. I am humbled. I will marry into the Eastern Palace not to be the crown princess, but for Xiao Jinglan. In my previous life, it was because the emperor insisted on making me the crown prince's consort. This angered Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu, which led to my tragic end. He was in a high position and didn't know that sometimes an emperor's favor was also a deadly weapon. I took the jade token from the eunuch's hand and felt it along the edges for a long time. I found the hidden mechanism and pressed it gently. The jade token split into two halves, and two small characters were engraved where they were connected. Yuan. Those were the small characters that the late empress had given to the crown prince. I returned the jade token to the emperor. The emperor, seated on the dragon throne, stared blankly at the jade token in his hands. His straight spine suddenly collapsed, as if he had lost his soul. In a daze, I felt that the man sitting alone on the high platform had grown several years older. After a long time, the emperor sighed. The mechanism inside this jade token was something I taught Qinghe. After speaking, he turned to Shaolin, who stood beside him with a stunned expression. His voice filled with anger. Since you have carried this with you every day, why did you not know its secret? Shaolin's face turned deathly pale, and he stammered, unable to speak. I quietly winked at Xiao Jinglan. Shaolin couldn't figure out how I knew the jade plaque had a hidden compartment. If it weren't for the previous life when he choked me by the neck, trying to gouge out my eyes with his own hands, I was in so much pain I couldn't breathe, screaming at the top of my lungs. In the struggle, I pulled off the jade plaque he had been wearing at his waist. The jade plaque fell to the ground, shattering into two pieces, revealing its hidden secrets. Thinking of all the crimes Shaolin had committed in my previous life, the look in my eyes toward him grew even more filled with disgust. Since the poison couldn't kill him, and the vortex of fate had once again brought us together, Shaolin, in this life, I will never, ever let you off easily. I had thought that it was clear who the true crown prince was between Xiao Jinglan and Shaolin. The emperor, enraged, would surely impose the harshest punishment on Shaolin. But to my surprise, he didn't mention a single word about how to deal with Shaolin. The emperor had not been favored in his youth. He was cunning and scheming, and in the end, he came out on top among the imperial princes. The most outrageous thing he did in his life was to snatch the fiancée of the Grand General Healing. He even made her the empress. The empress died in childbirth while giving birth to the crown prince. The emperor never remarried and kept his harem empty. When he learned that Xiao Jinglan was not his biological son and that the late empress had hated him until her death, he was filled with hatred. He even used his own child as a tool to take revenge on her. He vented all his hatred on Xiao Jinglan, who was not related to him by blood. He wrote the imperial edict ordering Xiao Jinglan to be executed with his own hand. But now he is so lenient with Shaolin. He only had him temporarily confined to an abandoned side hall. I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Everyone, withdraw. I am tired. The eunuch in charge extinguished the candles on the imperial desk and helped the emperor to his feet. As I stepped over the threshold of the imperial study, I turned my head involuntarily. All I saw was the frail figure of an old man, dragging his heavy steps. He disappeared into the depths of the curtains. Back in the Eastern Palace, Xiao Jinglan must have lost his mind. He pressed me against the door and kissed me for a long time. From the initial gentle touches to the later passionate kisses. Only when the moonlight shone through the window did he release me, pressing his forehead against mine and breathing heavily. Man, tell me, after I died in our previous life, did you suffer greatly? Xiao Jinglan, who was so cunning and decisive, had already guessed the truth from my unusual behavior. I hugged his slender waist, my voice low. Yes, I suffered greatly. It was terrible. That's why I must make up for it in this life. His warm fingertips caressed my cheek. Xiao Jinglan's voice was a little hoarse. I'm sorry. I didn't protect you. Then you have to live well and make it up to me slowly. We kissed again. Xiao Jinglan ordered someone to bring food. Then suddenly asked me, that poison, where did you buy it? I was extremely hungry and busy eating. So I pointed to Yunxiang, who was waiting nearby. Yunxiang replied naturally. From Huichun Tang in Dongshi. Why? No wonder. Xiao Jinglan sighed and explained to me. That's a black market shop. Their rat poison is made of starch. The hand holding the soup bowl stopped above the bowl. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was such a reason that had saved Shaolin from certain death. Truly, fate was cruel. Half a month passed. But the emperor had yet to make a decision regarding Shaolin. The astronomical observatory, however, was bustling with activity. The astronomical supervisor held a thick scroll of calculation papers and reported to the emperor during court that there had been an unusual celestial phenomenon. Such phenomena were inauspicious for the nation and could only be dispelled by someone bearing auspicious signs. As for this person of auspicious omens, after much investigation, they traced it back to Shaolin. The emperor was overjoyed and granted Shaolin a nominal title. He also permitted him to remain in the palace to assist the astronomical bureau in their duties. When I heard the news, I was feeding the fish in the courtyard. I scattered some fish food into the water, and the ripples spread out. Watching the fish scramble for the food, I couldn't muster any interest. Xiao Jinglan embraced me from behind, who made my little one frown. I tossed the fish food to Yunxiang, pulled Xiao Jinglan to a nearby pavilion, and sat down. Everyone knows that the astronomical observatory has always been the emperor's people. The emperor still suspects you. Seeing my anger, Xiao Jinglan chuckled. He does look too much like my father. And he is suspicious by nature. I frowned. By keeping him close, His Majesty is actually protecting him. Xiao Jinglan looked at the lake. The fish had finished eating and scattered, and the ripples on the lake slowly disappeared. How about grilled fish for dinner tonight? After I glared at him, Xiao Jinglan simply pulled me into his arms. We have plenty of time. Since both of us have been reborn and know things others don't, we should make good use of that. Shaolin was raised among the common people and is nothing but an ignorant fool. The only one he can rely on is the emperor. What if the emperor no longer trusts him? The secret guards I sent out a few days ago have just returned with a secret message. The old servants who were once by the late empress's side disappeared without a trace after leaving the palace. Now, no one can prove Shaolin's identity. Because of this so-called auspicious sign, Shaolin was thriving in the palace, enjoying the favor of the emperor. He was truly infatuated with Zhao Yinshu. He didn't know how he'd begged the emperor. He even let Zhao Yinshua enter the palace. That day, when I met Zhao Yinshua in the palace, I almost didn't recognize her. The peasant girl who used to sell buns and simple clothes was now dressed in brocade and wearing the most fashionable jade hairpin in the capital. The expression on her face was extremely arrogant, and she was followed by several obsequious palace maids who kept their heads down and did not dare to look at her. If you didn't know better, you would think that there was a new mistress in the palace. She flung her handkerchief and walked towards me. I glanced at her and waited for her to greet me. After all, Xiao Jinglan is still the crown prince, and I am his legally wedded wife, the crown princess consort, bestowed by the emperor. But to my surprise, Zhao Yinshu stopped in front of me, raised her chin, and rolled her eyes at me. She said loudly, "Some people pick up a stone and think it's a treasure." I smiled and pretended not to recognize her, asking in confusion, "Who is this?" Immediately, a palace maid rushed over and knelt before me, trembling as she replied, "Greetings, Crown Princess. Miss Zhao is the cousin of Minister Shinrui, here to visit him." Right. At this point, Shaolin had not yet been granted a name by the emperor and was still called Shinrui. Oh. I raised an eyebrow, sizing up Zhao Yanshua from head to toe, my tone laced with sarcasm. "I see you're so full of yourself. I was just wondering when the palace got another lady I don't recognize." Zhao Yanshua couldn't hold back. "Pfft. What crown princess? I'll see how long you can stay so arrogant. There are no walls that don't let the wind through in the palace." The emperor brought back a man from the countryside who looked 70% like him. He is most likely the real crown prince. Even my father and brother know about this. Zhao Yanshua is certain that Shaolin is the real crown prince. She has climbed onto Shaolin's tree and clearly intends to trample me underfoot. Not only did she refuse to bow to me, but she looked at me with a smug expression. Her eyes betrayed her defiance. Yunxiang tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Miss, is this woman crazy?" I laughed out loud. "She seems to be. We need to make her see sense." As soon as I finished speaking, I glared at her and said, "Miss Zhao has insulted me. Slap her until she knows her place." Zhao Yanshu shouted, "How dare you? Rui is the real crown prince. The one you married is just a fake. I will be the crown princess in the future. Anyone who dares to touch me, I will have Rui skin you alive." In her previous life, she was just as arrogant and ignorant. At that time, Shaolin was already the crown prince and protected her in every way possible. But now, it was still uncertain whether Shaolin was the crown prince. She dared to shout like that. She was as stupid as a pig. The palace maids who had been following Zhao Yanshua rushed forward and held her down. The clear sound of slaps echoed in the empty palace corridor. I asked Yunxiang to bring a low stool, poured some tea, and sat there watching Zhao Yanshua being beaten. In this scene, Yunxiang and I looked just like the cruel mistress and servant bullying Zhao Yanshu. Who knows how much more ruthless she was when she targeted Yunxiang and me in her previous life. Soon, Zhao Yanshu's cheeks swelled up, and blood trickled from the corners of her mouth. Her once beautiful face was now a pitiful sight. Shaolin received the news and rushed over. Behind him were the emperor and Xiao Jinglan. Xiao Jinglan wore a python-patterned robe, his hair tied up high, clearly having just returned from court. Zhao Yanshu saw Shaolin as if he were her savior, crawling to his feet while crying, "Rui Gu! Save me! Save Shuer!" Her eyes were filled with tears as she lifted her bruised face to Shaolin. "Shuer doesn't know what she did to offend the crown princess. Why is she treating me like this? Shuer is in so much pain." I squinted my eyes and curved my lips into a smile. She hadn't spoken like that earlier. "Does it hurt?" The pain I endured, the pain Yunxiang endured, was 1,000 times worse than this. "Does Zhao girl now know I'm the crown princess?" I bowed to the emperor, then stood up and gave Xiao Jinglan a reassuring glance without a word. I pushed Yunxiang aside and knelt heavily before the emperor. Your Majesty, Zhao girl said that Shindarin is the true crown prince. And she is the future crown princess. She said I'm nothing. As I spoke, I secretly pinched my thigh, tears welling up in my eyes as I bowed my head. I looked even more pitiful than Zhao Yanshua, who had been beaten. Your Majesty. I couldn't help but get angry. She said it doesn't matter about me. But by saying that, she's clearly questioning Your Majesty. Your Majesty is wise and mighty, you have your own decisions to make. How dare an outsider interfere? That's why I taught her a lesson. Zhao Yinshu was stunned by my words. Her eyes widened like copper bells. What are you talking about? How dare you? A fierce gaze darted between me and Zhao Yinshu, finally settling on Zhao Yinshu. The emperor flung his sleeves and scolded angrily. This is the imperial palace, not a place where anyone can run wild. Shinrue, control your people. If this happens again, I will severely punish you. Yuanxi is the crown princess I personally chose. And I don't want to hear anyone question my decision. Shaolin was not yet the crown prince. Zhao Yinshu's behavior was tantamount to putting him on the hot seat. He did not dare to argue and dragged Zhao Yinshu away. Zhao Yinshu refused to let go and continued to cry and fuss. Shaolin was annoyed by her noise and knocked her unconscious, then carried her away on his shoulder. As he left, he gave me a meaningful glance. On the way back to the Eastern Palace, Xiao Jinglan kept staring at me. I recalled how I had suddenly knelt before the emperor earlier, and he had instinctively reached out to help me. When he realized it was inappropriate, he silently withdrew his hand. The scene was really funny. I touched my face and asked him with a smile, "Is there something on my face?" Xiao Jinglan shook his head and said, "No. I just think you look especially pretty today, and I like it very much." I blushed and scolded him for being naughty. As a result, when we got back, he pulled me into doing even more naughty things. We didn't even have time to eat dinner. It was the rainy season, and the Wei River burst its banks. Xiao Jinglan was busy discussing flood control plans with the Ministry of Works. We didn't see him for several days. I learned from the housekeeper and often looked at the accounts until midnight. That day, I was tired from looking at the accounts and fell asleep on the desk. In my dream, Shaolin had once again become the crown prince. Zhao Yanshua stood beside him, laughing arrogantly. Fake is fake. How dare you pretend to be of royal blood? When I woke up, my palms were drenched in cold sweat. As long as Shaolin and Zhao Yanshua are alive, they will always be a source of trouble for Xiao Jinglan and me. On the first day of autumn, I asked Yunxiang to help me and cooked a few dishes myself. Crystal 8 treasure duck, brocade spring bamboo shoots, crab roe shrimp, pine nut and lily pastry. I also warmed up a pot of pomegranate wine. Xiao Jinglan hurriedly entered the room, took off his outer robe and placed it aside. As soon as he sat down at the table, he asked in surprise, "Did you make all these dishes yourself?" I nodded, propped my chin up, and winked at him. "Try it and see how it tastes." Xiao Jinglan took a few bites, his eyes flickering as if he had thought of something. He put down his chopsticks and carefully examined the plate of pine nut and lily pastries. "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with the pastries?" I asked suspiciously. Xiao Jinglan smiled and explained to me. Pine nut and lily pastries are all the rage in the capital, but the imperial kitchen never makes this dish. I was curious about it when I was a child, but later I found out that it's because the empress is allergic to pine nuts. Whenever she eats this pastry, her skin breaks out in a rash. So the emperor ordered the imperial kitchen to stop making it. I thought to myself, so the emperor is quite devoted. Xiao Jinglan picked up a pine nut and lily cake and fed it to me. Man, let's help Shaolin. I looked at the pine nut and lily cake and immediately understood. I smiled and said, "Okay. According to ancestral customs, 10 days after the beginning of autumn was the Chinchou festival. The emperor would host a banquet for the ministers and bestow rewards on the officials. At the palace banquet, Shaolin stood out the most. Apart from the emperor, he was the most extravagant. It seemed as though the position of crown prince was already within his grasp. A few conservative ministers glanced at him and shook their heads in disapproval. The maid standing beside Shaolin was none other than Zhao Yanshu. In the past, Zhao Yanshu would never have dressed as a maid. I don't know what trick Shaolin used to persuade her to do this willingly. In previous years, I attended the Chinchou banquet with my father and brothers. The dishes were mostly delicate and simple. This year, they were much more complicated than in the past. When the banquet began, the emperor frowned at the plate of white pastries on the table. He raised his hand as if to ask who had taken the liberty of adding this dish, and glanced at Xiao Jinglan and Shaolin. He remained silent and decided to let it go. After 3 rounds of wine, something strange happened. Shaolin, who had eaten the pine nut and lily pastry, broke out in a red rash, looking quite terrifying. Quickly summoned the imperial physician. The emperor's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he hurriedly called for the imperial physician to examine Shaolin. After diagnosing him, the imperial physician informed the emperor, Minister Shin must be allergic to the pine nut and lily pastry. Upon hearing this, the emperor's eyes darkened. After a moment of deep thought, he looked at Shaolin with a sudden intensity and said softly, "I recall that the late empress was also allergic to pine nut and lily pastry." Upon hearing this, everyone realized that the emperor was using this as an excuse. Lately, rumors that Shaolin was the true crown prince had been spreading like wildfire. The emperor turned to Xiao Jinglan and asked, "The crown prince doesn't seem interested in this dessert." "Your Majesty, I have never tasted it and do not know its flavor. So naturally I have no interest," Xiao Jinglan replied humbly. "Oh, in that case, Ru'er does seem to resemble the late empress." The emperor fixed his gaze on Shaolin, who was covered in red rashes, and spoke casually, "Could it be that Ru'er is actually the flesh and blood of this emperor in Qinghe?" As soon as he finished speaking, a minister stepped forward. "Your Majesty, people have different constitutions. To conclude that Minister Shin is of royal blood based solely on an allergic reaction is too frivolous. The crown prince has served the country, managed flood control, repaired river embankments, and worked tirelessly day and night. His achievements are evident to all. Please reconsider." "Your Majesty," Xiao Jinglan rose and said, "If His Majesty insists that I am not the biological son of His Majesty and Empress Qinghe, I have nothing more to say. I beg His Majesty to allow me to complete the tasks at hand and continue to work for the welfare of the people." He currently oversees the 6 ministries and holds a crucial position. It is not that no one else can do the job, but no one can do it better than him. After a prolonged standoff, the emperor glanced at Xiao Jinglan, who stood tall and composed. He waved his hand and gently turned the page. "What I said earlier was merely a jest." What happened at the palace banquet quickly spread throughout the court. Thinking back to the emperor's ambiguous attitude, for a moment, it was unclear what this deep-minded emperor really wanted to do. However, Xiao Jinglan suddenly appeared to relax. "He took me hunting. He took me to the archery range to teach me how to shoot. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, held my hands, and drew the bow. Every arrow hit the bullseye. He said, 'Wait a little longer, it's almost time.'" A few days later, the emperor suddenly mentioned during the morning court session that Shaolin had some talent, and it was a waste to give him only a nominal position. He called on Xiao Jinglan to ask his opinion. Xiao Jinglan neatly organized the case of the Wei River breach he was handling and handed it to Shaolin. The Wei River had breached its banks, causing another flood. He had worked tirelessly to manage the situation for a long time, and it was now in its final stages. Handing it over to Shaolin at this point was effectively handing over the credit for his hard work. Xiao Jinglan, however, appeared magnanimous. After a night of intimacy, he held me in his arms as we sat in the courtyard watching the moon. The full moon hung high in the pitch-black sky. Xiao Jinglan twirled a strand of my hair between his fingers, his voice still hoarse. The Wei River case seems to be nearing its conclusion, but there are still major hidden dangers. Those local officials are not easy to deal with, and replacing the person in charge at this time will only give them more opportunities to take advantage of the situation. With Shaolin's abilities, I'm afraid he won't be able to get anything done and will most likely mess things up. Sure enough, the case, which should have been completed in a month, was dragged on for 3 months by Shaolin. This caused constant complaints from local officials and discontent among the people. The Wei River Dam, which was supposed to have been repaired, once again burst its banks. The floodwaters swept away vast tracts of fertile land. It is said that the emperor flew into a rage in the imperial court. He berated Shaolin for being unfit for his position. This grudge was now directed at Xiao Jinglan. When Xiao Jinglan and I entered the palace, we encountered him several times. Shaolin's gaze seemed as though he wanted to devour Xiao Jinglan whole. He believed that Xiao Jinglan had intentionally sabotaged him. If he truly had the ability, this achievement would have been effortless. After this incident, because the emperor only scolded Shaolin verbally and did not punish him, rumors that Shaolin was the real crown prince spread like wildfire in the capital. Relying on Shaolin's influence, Zhao Yanxue was even invited to participate in a flower-picking party for the noble ladies of the capital. She looked down on those expensive flowers. Instead, she favored the blooming peonies, picking several to adorn her hair. Had the imperial harem not been vacant, such a bold move would have cost her her head long ago. She deliberately stepped on my skirt and fell to the ground. While apologizing, she glared at me with a venomous expression. When no one was around, she exposed the mottled red marks under her collar and said to me, "When Rui becomes crown prince, I will be his crown princess. So what if his majesty has his eye on you? Rui only loves me." I sneered. Then I wish Miss Zhao will get her wish soon. Zhao Yanxue did not expect me to respond like that and stood there dumbfounded. It felt like punching a pillow. After the new year, envoys from the neighboring country delivered a letter. They would soon send their most favored third prince to pay a state visit, to showcase the grandeur of the great nation. The banquet alone took several days to prepare. Since Shaolin had an allergic reaction to the pine nut and lily pastry last time, the head chef of the imperial kitchen was severely punished. This dessert was still not included in the palace meals. However, the third prince of the neighboring country took a tour of the capital city upon his arrival. He accidentally ate some pine nut and lily cake from Yiping Xian and was amazed by its taste. He enthusiastically packed a lot of it to share with everyone. Shaolin refused repeatedly, saying that he was allergic to this dessert. Unexpectedly, the third prince's face darkened and insisted that Shaolin's refusal to eat it was disrespectful to him and his father, the emperor. The pine nut and lily cake was elevated to such a high status that the emperor gave Shaolin a displeased look. Shaolin gritted his teeth and swallowed the pine nut and lily cake, forcing a smile and praising its excellent taste. However, after a long time, no red rashes appeared on his body. The third prince looked unconcerned. "This is fine, isn't it? Where are you allergic? Could you be deliberately deceiving this prince?" Everyone looked at Shaolin with mixed expressions, and the emperor's face slowly darkened. The scene was a little awkward. So Shaolin, in order to prove himself, snatched the plate of pastries and stuffed them into his mouth. But no matter how many he stuffed into his mouth, he didn't have any allergic symptoms. He didn't believe it and ate another piece. But because he moved too quickly, he almost choked. His red face and thick neck were really embarrassing. Seeing this, everyone exchanged glances, and the emperor on the stage's face darkened. After giving Shaolin a stern look, he suppressed his anger and said, "Perhaps Minister Shin made a mistake. The allergic reaction last time was not caused by this pastry. Minister Shin, you should apologize to the third prince immediately." Shaolin's legs trembled, and without thinking, he knelt down. He hurriedly bowed his head and apologized to the third prince. The third prince held his wine cup and leaned back, saying, "Enough. Enough. It's as if I'm bullying someone." His gaze inadvertently met Xiao Jinglan's, and the corner of his mouth curled into a knowing smile. The grand banquet held to welcome the envoys from the neighboring country ended in chaos. The third prince used the excuse of being drunk and returned to the official residence early. As the palace gates closed, the emperor immediately summoned his secret guards to investigate Shaolin. Soon, the secret guards discovered that Shaolin had visited an herbal pharmacy outside the palace to purchase medicine. The emperor's face darkened. What kind of medicine did he buy? The secret guards respectfully handed over the prescription. The imperial physician examined it carefully and stated bluntly, "This prescription is not life-threatening, but it will cause the person who consumes it to break out in a rash all over their body." The emperor was furious and picked up the teacup at his side and threw it at Shaolin's head. Blood flowed from Shaolin's forehead, but he did not dare to wipe it away. His face pale, he defended himself loudly. "It wasn't me. I didn't go there." The emperor threw the portrait brought by the secret guards at him and said, "Look at it yourself. Who else is the person in this portrait if not you?" The guards at the palace gate also said that you definitely left the palace that day. "Where did you go?" It really wasn't him. It was Xiao Jinglan who disguised himself. He deliberately chose the day when Shaolin left the palace. He disguised himself as Shaolin and went to the medicine shop to get a medicine that would cause a rash all over the body. He then secretly put it in the pine nut and lily pastry that day. After Shaolin ate it, he would break out in a rash all over his body, as if he had an allergic reaction to the pine nut and lily pastry. As for where Shaolin went, he would not say and did not dare to say. If the emperor found out that he had left the palace that day to visit a brothel, and that he had accepted 10,000 taels of gold from the son of the Minister of Rights to do something shameful for him, the charges against him would be far more severe than this current offense. Shaolin still tried to exonerate himself. Little did he know that the more he spoke, the more suspicion he aroused in the emperor. The emperor leaned his forehead against his hand, massaging the acupoints at the corners of his eyes, and waved his hand, ordering his men to take him away. Not sending him directly to the dungeon was already showing leniency. Shaolin could not fathom it. Why did he have an allergic reaction to the pine nut and lily cookies? Sometimes yes and sometimes no? He clearly hadn't gone to the pharmacy to buy medicine. But they found records of him buying medicine. Even the pine nut and lily cookies. They were clearly forbidden in the palace. Yet they appeared one after another. When he realized that he had been framed, he was so angry that he smashed 7 or 8 fine porcelain vases in the hall. The palace attendants trembled in fear as they reminded him that all the items were accounted for in the ledgers. Enraged, he kicked one of them 3 or 4 meters away. Zhao Yanshu didn't know what had happened. She came to find Shaolin with a smile on her face. "Ruigu, when is the emperor finally going to name you crown prince?" This remark hit Shaolin right where it hurt. His eyes red with anger. He grabbed Zhao Yanshu by the neck and threw her onto the bed. The sound of silk being torn apart mingled with her intermittent cries of pain and pleas for mercy. Soon, it turned into the heart-wrenching screams of a woman in agony. The palace maids on duty outside the hall seemed oblivious to the commotion. They went about their business, sweeping the fallen leaves under the eaves. Shaolin had lost the emperor's favor due to the incident with the pine nut and lily pastries. The emperor began to favor Xiao Jinglan once again. Finally, on a day off, Xiao Jinglan took me to the palace to pay respects to the emperor. We stayed until after the emperor had finished his midday meal before leaving. We walked hand in hand along the path in the imperial garden. The palace attendants tending to the flowers couldn't help but exclaim, "The crown prince is truly handsome. And the crown princess is as beautiful as a fairy." That's right. No wonder the emperor said that the crown princess is a model for all women. Xiao Lin, who was passing by, heard this and his face darkened. He gritted his teeth and bowed to me and Xiao Jinglan. I smiled and greeted him. "Minister Shin, you are also of marriageable age. Do you have a woman you like?" He probably didn't expect me to say that to him. Xiao Lin looked at me with a complicated expression and replied after a long pause. "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. But I have no plans to marry at the moment." I feigned surprise. "Then what about Miss Zhao?" "Miss Zhao is merely my cousin." I feigned understanding and whispered to him. "Marriage could be a great asset for someone like you, Minister Shin. A good in-law family could." Seeing his eyes flicker, I knew he was tempted. I smiled and turned to leave with Xiao Jinglan. Now Zhao Yanshua was sure to cause another scene. That evening, the Chancellor's mansion received a visit from Xiao Lin. After refusing several times, the Chancellor finally agreed to meet him. To everyone's surprise, Xiao Lin revealed his true intentions, openly asking the Chancellor for his daughter's hand in marriage and even promising her the title of Crown Princess. The Chancellor pretended not to understand his intentions, brushed him off with a few casual words, and immediately reported the matter to the Emperor. The Emperor, who had seized power through intrigue in his youth, hated factionalism and corruption above all else. During the court assembly, he harshly rebuked Xiao Lin in front of all the ministers for his wolfish ambitions. He demoted him and told him to fend for himself. Upon hearing this, Zhao Yanshua dragged Xiao Lin and began to throw a tantrum. "When we were together, you promised to give me the position of crown princess. Now you dare to seek marriage with another noblewoman. Has Rui forgotten the promise he made to Shuer?" Xiao Lin, already suspected by the Emperor, finally erupted after suppressing his emotions for so long. He slapped Zhao Yanshua hard across the face. The slap sent Zhao Yanshu flying to the ground. She stared blankly, touching the mark on her face, her mind gone. Xiao Lin also felt a pang of guilt, looking at Zhao Yanshu sitting on the ground. Not only could she no longer help his status, but her once beautiful appearance was also fading day by day. The more he thought about it, the more irritated he became, and he stormed off. It was said that Zhao Yanshu's cries echoed throughout the palace that day. In his previous life, Xiao Lin had shown such deep love for Zhao Yanshu. In this life, without the status of crown prince, his childhood sweetheart had turned into his enemy. And that was that. When the palace servants around Xiao Lin told me all about this, I was pruning a newly blooming peony. The sharp scissors made asna sound, and the broken stem and leaves fell to the ground along with the blossoming flower. They fell neatly at my feet. Xiao Lin behaved himself for a while, not daring to provoke the emperor's anger again. Xiao Jinglan and I always felt that he would not give up so easily. He was the crown prince, second only to the emperor himself. When the emperor passed away, he would ascend the throne and rule over a vast empire. After disappearing for several days, Xiao Lin suddenly went to the imperial study with a scroll and timidly said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, I have something to report." "Speak," the emperor said impatiently. Xiao Lin immediately presented everything he had in his arms. "Your Majesty, I accidentally found the former empress's senior palace maid. She told me that she had personally taken me from the former empress's side and brought me out of the palace. Your Majesty, please look." Xiao Lin immediately presented everything in his arms. "Your Majesty, I accidentally found the senior palace maid who served the late empress. She told me that she personally carried me out of the palace from the late empress's side. Your Majesty, do you remember what this palace maid looks like?" After listening to Xiao Lin, the emperor opened the scroll, and his expression changed several times. He called for his secret guards and said, "Go investigate immediately and find out if this is true." Shaolin stood in front of the emperor and added in a low voice. She also said that she was the one who left me at the door of that farmer's house. And she was the one who put the jade plaque in my swaddling clothes. The emperor's hands clutching the scroll were covered with blue veins. After a long time, he nodded slightly and dismissed Shaolin. "Bring Xiao Jinglan to see me." With a loud crash, the gates of the eastern palace were forced open. The commander of the imperial guards, his face icy, extended his hand toward Xiao Jinglan and said in a harsh tone, "The emperor commands the crown prince to enter the palace." My heart sank as I realized something major was happening in the palace. This was clearly a sign that the emperor had already sentenced Xiao Jinglan to death. The scene from my previous life, when Xiao Jinglan was taken away by the imperial guards, flashed before my eyes. This time, I would not let him face it alone. Ignoring the imperial guards' attempts to stop me, I insisted on going with him. Upon entering the palace, a woman with her hair styled like an older woman was kneeling on the ground. The emperor pointed at her and asked Shaolin, "Is this the senior palace maid who served by the late empress's side?" Shaolin glanced at her and immediately nodded. "Yes, it is. She was the one who carried me out of the palace back then." The emperor looked at the woman, as if recalling something. "I remember you. You accompanied the late empress into the palace back then. Did the late empress order you to switch the babies after she gave birth to the crown prince?" The woman raised her head slightly, glanced at Shaolin, then secretly glanced at me and Xiao Jinglan. She lowered her head, kowtowed, and replied, "The late empress did indeed order me to swap the prince she gave birth to with an abandoned baby outside the palace." Upon hearing this, the emperor's gaze toward Xiao Jinglan grew even colder, and anger spread across his face. I quietly pulled up my sleeve to reveal a delicate little gold lock. Just as the emperor was about to deal with Xiao Jinglan, the woman kowtowed again and said, "This is the key to the secret room in the palace." The woman kowtowed 3 more times and said, "I know very well that the royal bloodline cannot be mixed. So I did not switch the crown prince." Everyone present was stunned. The emperor's face turned pale, and he asked the woman, "How can you prove that what you say is true? I remember that His Highness the Crown Prince has a birthmark in the shape of a plum blossom on his chest. Your Majesty can check for yourself." So, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Xiao Jinglan loosened his collar. The plum blossom birthmark was revealed. Shaolin was completely dumbfounded. He shouted loudly that the woman was a liar. "I am the crown prince. I am the crown prince. You are in cahoots with Xiao Jinglan. You are all in cahoots." But the woman was someone he had found. Now she was claiming to be Xiao Jinglan's accomplice. After being deceived time and again, how could the emperor possibly believe him? At the emperor's command, Shaolin was imprisoned in the imperial prison reserved for death row inmates. The moonlight outside the palace was beautiful, but Shaolin would never see the moonlight of this world again. Xiao Jinglan took my hand and led me out of the palace gates. I looked at the model tree shadows reflected on the palace wall and let out a long sigh. "It's all over." Xiao Jinglan bent down, covered me with his large cloak, and kissed me on the lips. "You've worked hard these past few days. Men's words cannot be trusted. They say they've worked hard, but when they return to the East Palace, they have to do even harder things with me." I was exhausted and snuggled into Xiao Jinglan's embrace, humming softly. I was utterly exhausted and curled up in Xiao Jinglan's embrace, whimpering softly. Over the past few days, Xiao Jinglan's secret guards, following my instructions, had been closely monitoring Shaolin's movements. They discovered that he had found the senior palace maid who had served the late empress and had taken her family hostage to coerce her. Fortunately, I had sent someone to rescue her family, using the golden lock as proof. Only then did she change her tune and turn the tables on Shaolin. The next day, Yunxiang said that someone was waiting for me at the back door. I hurriedly put on my robe and went out, only to find that it was the senior palace maid who had been close to the former empress. She was dressed in inconspicuous clothes, apparently avoiding the emperor's spies and coming here on purpose. I bowed to her and said, "Thank you for your help yesterday." Her expression was calm, like a still ancient well. "Princess consort, there is no need to thank me. What I did was not for you. Even if you had not saved my family yesterday, I would have done the same. Once I have completed my final task, I will go to accompany the empress." With that, she left. Shaolin has been imprisoned, and so has Zhao Yanshu. Yunxiang ground the ink, and I wrote the 3 characters Zhao Yanshu in the paper. I sent someone to bring Zhao Yanshu to the Eastern Palace. Her hair was disheveled, and there was a fresh slap mark on her face. Upon seeing me, she screamed wildly, "You bitch! I am the crown princess. I am." I walked up to her and said softly, "Your brother Rui has been imprisoned. And as for you, you will soon be joining him." Zhao Yanshu was stunned and stared at me with wide eyes, the light in her eyes quickly fading. "I can give you some money and send you away," I whispered in her ear. She looked up at me, somewhat surprised and uncertain. "Just tell the emperor that Shinrui's jade token was found." Zhao Yanshu thought for a moment, then clenched her teeth and asked, "Will you really send me away?" I nodded, and she immediately grabbed my hand. "Take me to the palace. Take me to the palace. I'll go right now. If your Rui brother finds out you're doing this to him, he'll be heartbroken." I laughed mockingly at their deep love. To my surprise, Zhao Yanshuo burst into laughter. Glaring at me with a look of resentment, he was the one who forgot his promise. He was the one who betrayed me. He turned me into this monstrous creature. You don't know, do you? I was pregnant with his child. But he didn't want it. He said I wasn't worthy of bearing his child. He forced me to drink the abortion potion. It hurt so much. I bled so much. Since that's the case, why should I spare his life? I quietly made arrangements within the palace. Zhao Yanshu rushed into the Golden Hall, shouting that she had something urgent to report to the emperor. The emperor was in a rage and didn't want to see her. But when he heard that it was about Shaolin, he couldn't help but summon her. As soon as Zhao Yanshu saw the emperor, she immediately knelt down. She vividly described how Shaolin had found the jade token, how he had been brought back to the palace by the emperor's men, how he had harbored evil intentions after learning he might be the crown prince, and how he had learned from the palace servants that the late empress was allergic to pine nut and lily pastries. So he had bought the medicine to create the illusion that he was also allergic to them. She spilled everything like water pouring out of a bamboo tube. I never expected Zhao Yanshu to be so ruthless. Her skill in fabricating lies was truly first-rate. Seeing this woman who had grown up with Shaolin confirm everything, the emperor finally realized that Shaolin was nothing but a fraud. He was ambitious yet utterly foolish, allowing himself to be manipulated by an emperor. In a fit of rage, the emperor coughed up blood. The attendants scrambled to summon the imperial physician to save the emperor. Zhao Yanshua took advantage of the chaos to flee the palace. She demanded money from me to leave. I smiled and ordered the secret guards to take her to the courtyard where I had been imprisoned in my previous life. Looking at her haggard appearance, I told her, "You can't go anywhere. You still have sins to atone for." "Wretch! Poisonous woman!" Zhao Yanshu shouted curses at me. I ignored her and ordered the secret guards. "Cut out her tongue." Under her terrified expression, they first cut off her tongue, then broke her spine. She lay on the ground, twisting and struggling, emitting painful whimpers. Sticks struck Zhao Yanshu's body one after another. She writhed and twitched like rotten mud, her body soaked in blood. What I did was merely what she had done to me in her previous life. After I had my fill of her agonized expression, I said, "Take her to the brothel and find some beggars to take care of her. Zhao Yanshu, the sins you committed in your previous life, you shall taste them yourself." Returning to the Eastern Palace, I jumped down from the carriage. The first thing I saw was Xiao Jinglan's figure. He was waiting for me. I sniffed and walked up to hug him. I slipped my hand into his warm cloak. "Xiao Jinglan, I'm becoming more and more cruel. Man, you did well in your previous life, and now you are reaping the rewards in this life." Xiao Jinglan picked me up horizontally and carried me across the corridor with steady, powerful steps. He said, "Shaolin is a cruel and narrow-minded person who is petty and vicious. But he lacks intelligence. If such a person becomes the crown prince, he will surely bring chaos to the world. He is unworthy of his position and will surely meet his downfall. He is unfit for the throne, both for the country and for the people. Even if he is the crown prince, I will kill him and take his place. Man is cruel, but I am even crueler. The cruel Xiao Jinglan and the cruel Jiang Yuanzhi. They are indeed a perfect match." Shaolin was spending his days in the imperial prison in fear. I heard that the prison guards only gave him a bowl of rice and half a bowl of water each day. When I saw him again, I almost didn't recognize him. At least he used to look somewhat human. Now he was skin and bones, with not a trace of humanity left. Zhao Yanshu was being well taken care of in the brothel. I stuffed Zhao Yanshu, writhing like a maggot, into a sack and brought her before Shaolin. "Minister Shin, your beloved has betrayed you, accusing you of finding the jade token and impersonating the crown prince. There is both eyewitness testimony and physical evidence. You have no chance of escaping this." Shaolin's eyes bulged with rage as he shouted Zhao Yanshu's name, cursing her as a beast and a whore. I untied the sack, and a pool of blood flowed out. Zhao Yanshu's blurry face emerged. "There. I know you hate her. Isn't this helping you?" Looking at Shaolin's pale face, I kindly told him, "By the way, the emperor has already agreed to hand you over to me for punishment." Shaolin, his eyes red, screamed, "You poisonous woman." Yes, I am indeed a poisonous woman. So I smiled and pushed Zhao Yanshu toward him, saying, "Go out her eyes, and I'll let you go." He looked at the writhing Zhao Yanshu, his hands trembling, and touched her face. "I'm sorry, Schwerer." In his constant struggle, he clung tightly to Zhao Yanshu and thrust his hands into her eye sockets with all his strength. The intense cries from his throat echoed throughout the prison. These two really were a pair. Shaolin did not dare to look at the eyeballs he had gouged out, quickly throwing them behind him and looking at me eagerly. I kicked Zhao Yanshu, who was motionless, as if she were dead but not quite. I smiled at Shaolin and said, "I'm a poisonous woman. Of course I'm lying to you." I knelt before the emperor, sobbing uncontrollably. I told him that because of Shaolin and Zhao Yanshu, I had been suffering from palpitations and couldn't sleep properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I would recall the scene of Xiao Jinglan being dragged away by the imperial guards. The emperor felt guilty and granted my request to have Shaolin executed by dismemberment. The day before the execution, I went to see Shaolin one last time. He hadn't eaten for days and had been tortured to the point of losing his mind. I smiled at him and said, "Minister Shin, do you know that you actually have another name? It's Shaolin. Xiao is the imperial surname, and Lin means grace." When Shaolin heard this, he struggled violently. His misty eyes slowly lit up, then went blank again. His voice was broken and he spoke intermittently. He asked me, "Why did I see hatred in your eyes when I first saw you? Jiang Yuanzhi, have we met before?" I looked at him through the prison door and said, "No." "Then why did you treat me like that? No matter who between Xiao Jinglan and me became the crown prince, you would have been the crown princess. because you're not as handsome as Xiao Jinglan. You're ugly. After saying that, I walked away without looking back. I ignored Xiaolin's cries and shouts from inside the cell. I just covered my ears silently. On the day of Xiaolin's execution, it snowed heavily in the capital. Xiao Jinglan and I stood at the window on the second floor of Yipingxian at the entrance of the market. We watched as the executioner's knife fell, like snowflakes falling from the sky. After about half an hour, the snow fell even harder. The swirling snowflakes seemed to want to bury all the past sins. A circle of freshly hunted fox fur wrapped around my neck. I rubbed my hands together and exhaled. Turning my head, my gaze fell on Xiao Jinglan's jade-like profile. It's cold. Let's go back. Yunxiang has roasted sweet potatoes for us. Xiao Jinglan took my hand and left the first-class pavilion. When the waiter came to clear the table, he took the silver left on the table and muttered under his breath. Strange. There were clearly 2 people here just now. When did they leave? After the spring, the emperor's health deteriorated rapidly. He needed a constant supply of medicinal soups every day. He finally learned of the former empress's deep hatred for him. So he compensated Xiao Jinglan twice over for what he owed him. He also restored the titles of my father and brother. He called Xiao Jinglan and me over and held Xiao Jinglan's hand. He said that the best thing he had ever done in his life was to choose me as Xiao Jinglan's crown princess. Another half-year passed, and the emperor fell seriously ill. Xiao Jinglan was appointed regent. He had to personally attend to all matters great and small in the court. On the day the emperor passed away, Xiao Jinglan and I kept vigil at his bedside. Zhou Nanny, whom we hadn't seen in a long time, also came. When the emperor saw her, he remembered the late empress and muttered, Qinghe, Qinghe, I've come to find you. Zhou Nyang spoke coldly. Your Majesty, the empress is already dead. Do you still wish to disturb her peace in the afterlife? The emperor was already emaciated, but upon hearing this, he widened his eyes in shock. You. What do you mean? Zhou looked at the emperor. Her eyes filled with coldness. Your Majesty doesn't know, but you killed your own son with your own hands. Suddenly, rapid footsteps could be heard outside. The empress's remains are no longer in the imperial mausoleum. I buried her together with General He. May the emperor not meet the empress again in his next life. The emperor suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. You. Qinghe is mine. Qinghe is my wife for all eternity. In the autumn of the 14th year of Qingyuan, Emperor Zhaoyuan passed away. Xiao Jinglan ascended the throne and made me empress. We ascended the city walls together. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and whispered softly in my ear. You and I, year after year, will watch the sun and moon endure. The rivers and mountains remain eternal. The following year, the emperor reformed the national system and ruled alongside the empress. End.